and seeing these amazing ways of looking at these flowers. I thank Stephen for participating and bringing his beautiful photos here. And Stephen's going to say a few words about the project and his ideas about the history of this kind of technology, but also how the mind uses all these things.
First one, I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank Nicholas Cueva for putting on this show. I want to thank all of the other people in TI Arts and Studios who are coming, and just want to express my appreciation for what a wonderful community you have here. And so nice to see friends and relatives and loved ones. So I want to single out Rebecca Goldstein, my wife, novelist and philosopher, who is here or was here. I think I know where she is. Danielle Blau, stepdaughter, poet and author, and Kai Blau, dancer and toddler. Which I expect right now is somewhere with Rebecca. So thank you for coming. 2.5D refers to a theory of the representation of visual space that comes from artificial intelligence. And about 40 years ago, the great neuroscientist David Marr proposed that we don't see exactly in 2 dimensions because we have a sense of depth. We don't really see in 3 dimensions because that's not what each eye sends to the brain. It's a 2-dimensional image that comes from the retina. And we see in perspective. When you stand between 2 railroad tracks, you know they extend to the horizon. You also see them converge. You see smaller objects appear to get smaller as they recede into the distance. You see objects that are behind opaque barriers become occluded. That's not what you get if you had a 3-dimensional model of reality. So he suggested that what the brain receives from the eyes is 2.5-dimensional representation. The half dimension of depth being computed, not given by position along the retina, but computed in various ways. We get a sense of depth from reversing perspective when lines converge. We interpret them as parallel lines extending in depth. When we move, or when things move, we use the parallax motion, the fact that things that are closer wiggle more across the visual field than things in depth. Sometimes you'll see a basketball player move side to side as he sights the basket because that enhances the sense of depth. But perhaps the most pungent, powerful cue to depth, the one that we feel most vividly, is the one that comes from the difference between our 2 eyes. This was only discovered in the 19th century. Da Vinci was not aware of it as far as we know, Newton, Aristotle, but an engineer named Charles Wheatstone reasoned that since each eye has a slightly different vantage point, there is no single image, no cyclopean image, as if coming from the mythical beast with a single eyeball in his forehead, that the brain could fuse. On the other hand, because the 2 views are slightly different, that carries information about the 3rd dimension. It's kind of a high school trigonometry problem. Given the angle of the 2 eyes, the distance between the 2 eyes, and the difference between the images of the 2 eyes, you can compute the 3rd dimension. And just a way to make that obvious is, if you close one eye and hold a finger in front of you, then close the other eye, the finger kind of hops back and forth because each eye is seeing it from a different vantage point. Something that you see farther in the distance also hops, but much less. So that from the difference between the 2 eyes, there is information about the third dimension. And we kind of reproduce that even in when it's mental space as opposed to visual space. If you, as I talked about lines converging to the horizon, you probably could all visualize. If you stand between railroad tracks in your mind's eye, you can kind of see them converging, which means that your mind's eye also sees in perspective, that is in 2.5 dimensions, not in a perfect 3-dimensional representation in which parallel lines would just be parallel. Now, the idea that the brain actually uses the difference between the 2 eyeballs views to compute the 3rd dimension was not obvious for centuries. Scientists thought we have two eyes for the same reason we have two kidneys, namely we have kind of two of almost everything, we're bilaterally symmetrical. The idea that that could be put to use in the brain's computations awaited a proof which would consist of showing two images taken from different vantage points. If you could figure out a way of getting one to the left eye and one to the right eye, then even though both of them are flat, they should pop into the third dimension. That's the principle of stereoscopy. Now, the reason that you can't do it just by putting two pictures side by side is because of the way that the eyes are controlled by the brain. Namely, as something changes in depth, your eyes have to do two things. They have to, your two eyeballs rotate in your skull, and they have to converge for something that's close and be parallel for something that's far away. At the same time, and you can kind of feel it, you bring your finger closer and closer, you get cross-eyed. At the same time, if you close one eye when you bring something close, you can feel a different kind of strain. Namely, inside each eyeball, there's an adjustable lens that has to get fatter as an object is closer and skinnier as it's farther away to converge the light beams that come from different distances. The problem is those two reflexes are coupled. As you move your eyeballs in, you also focus closer, which means that if you just present two pictures in front of each eye, then either you look through them, in which case each one's a fuzzy blob, or you focus on them, in which case you're seeing two pictures rather than one superimposed. So what all these different gadgets do is they figure out different ways of solving the problem of superimposing two side-by-side images. Now this thing, this was invented in the 19th century. This version was invented by Oliver Wendell Holmes, the poet and physician and writer and wit, and they sold by the millions. Before, what did people do before TV and the internet and Netflix? They had one of these and they put cards in the slot of side-by-side photos taken of the pyramids and the Eiffel Tower and Yosemite and Niagara Falls, and they pass it around, and they have two lenses. The lens would spare the eye of the task of having to focus close, so you could focus at infinity, which means that your eyes could be parallel. Each eye would see one image. The other technology from the 19th century was what Wheatstone, the discoverer of stereo, himself invented. His apparatus was much bigger. But these are mirrors, and what the mirrors do is they shift the two images so they're superimposed. And so your eye can focus at infinity, and the two images are already superimposed. So a lot of the technologies since then have used one or the other. This Viewmaster sold at every tourist trap has a ring of slides, again, one taken from one vantage point, the other taken from a few inches away, that with lenses, like the one invented by Oliver Wendell Holmes, but you have 7 instead of just a single one. The anaglyph here are printed in false color. This is a way of getting a very large image and relatively primitive apparatus. Namely, if you print one image in red, the other image in its complement, namely blue, green, or cyan, and then you have lenses of the complementary color, then the red lens lets in the image printed in cyan, the cyan image lets the red image, the image printed in red, and so each eye gets a separate image superimposed. The final technology, and the one that is most, I think, most awe-inspiring, are the ones displayed in these 3 monitors, where you don't need any apparatus at all. They're a little bit like those cheesy lenticular prints that you may have played with as a kid, where you have a grid of plastic superimposed on a print of where the left eye view and the right eye view are sliced into ribbons and interdigitated, and the lenses superimposed on the print direct the left eye stripes to the left eye and the right eye stripes to the right eye. That's what these monitors do, except that the stripes are microscopic so you can't see them. And the eye cam, there's a camera on the top that looks at where your eyeballs are. And dynamically adjusts the images so that the right eye only sees the right eye stripes and the left eye always sees the left eye stripes. And so no gear, no headgear, no glasses, no nothing. And so they are particularly awesome. Many of you have gone to an Apple store and tried the Apple Vision Pro. That uses this kind of technology, namely 2 screens and lenses that do the focusing for you. So this is a way of giving that extremely vivid third dimension from a pair of 2-dimensional images, all different technologies. Now the content, if you will, these are some of my favorite photographic subjects, and I combine my interest in 3D space with my passion for photography in this 3D project. One of the things that the combination of extreme close-up and stereo photography gives you is a view of small objects, in this case flowers, that you could never get in real life. You could never hold a flower that close to you and see it both in focus and in depth. So it's a little bit like the view of the actual audience for which flowers evolved, namely insects. So it's for me, a unique perspective on flowers. It's a cliche to say that flowers are beautiful, but there's an extra, I feel, dimension of beauty when you see the details and the contrast that close, that vividly. And Holmes, Oliver Wendell Holmes, wrote a wonderful essay in The Atlantic, a magazine that he co-founded among his many projects, just waxing about the unique experience in photography, but especially the unique experience of stereo photography. He said the mind reaches out and feels the very depth of the world, giving a detail that's almost preposterous. So it does add to the experience, and it raises the additional question for me as to why we find flowers so beautiful in the first place. The fact that another one of our distinguished guests, Haida Hatri, has used in some of her own art to give a sense of paradox and shock and surprise. But flowers are beautiful, and the question is, why are they beautiful to us, given they didn't evolve to please us? They evolved to entice insects, and we're not very related to insects, or in some cases, hummingbirds. And it raises the somewhat heretical idea that beauty may not entirely be in the eye of the beholder. That if there are things that are beautiful to creatures that evolved completely independently, maybe there's even a sense in which beauty is in the world. Now, what could that mean? Well, one kind of line of thought is that beauty purifies and concentrates non-randomness, order, kind of counter entropy. So what would you get if instead of a random array of pixels or a random volume of stuff kind of ground together, which would kind of be a featureless beige? Well, if you've got symmetry, that is a very unusual arrangement of pixels. Of all of the possible arrangement of pixels, an infinitesimal fraction of them are bilaterally symmetrical or radially symmetrical. Likewise, an infinitesimal fraction would have a big splash of a particular hue, rather than everything kind of merging together, like when you're a kid, you mix all your paints together and they end up a kind of dull brown. If you've got things separated, that suggests there's something in the world that is very organized, non-random, some process that is pushed back against the chaotic and homogenizing forces of entropy that are therefore worthy of your continued attention, whether the you is a bumblebee or a hummingbird or a human being. Anyway, that is a speculation on beauty as revealed by close-ups in flowers. In this case, shown off by 150 years worth of technology, all of which solving the same problem of how do you exploit the brain's power of computing that third dimension, that half dimension, out of two-dimensional vantage points. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.